at the start of the last episode, I introduced you to a dude who's been at the centre of death metal in Florida. He is good as grew up in Morrisound, the studio where most of that music came from. He's played with Chuck Schuldiner in Death, and he added his talents to many, many great records as a guitarist. His name is Ralph Santolla. He's the guy who the best bands go to when they need a shit-hot player. So in the last episode, we focused on his time with Death, with Chuck and with all those guys, how he toured the Individual Thought Patterns record. This second and concluding episode of our time with Ralph, it's a bit different. We're going to focus on his time with Deicide and the amazing guitar he was able to bring to that record, the Stench of Redemption. A great, great record made at a time when Deicide really, really were down on their luck. So if you need a reminder of just how good that record was and how good Ralph was on that record, here's a little idea. Pretty cool. So, welcome to the Metal Insight Podcast, episode 41, produced and reported by MetalIreland.com. I'm Earl Grey, and before we begin, I got to tell you about a couple of announcements. There's a gig you need to know about that you got to get down to. That's Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes. That's Frank, who you'll remember, of course, from Gallows. They're playing Belfast's Mandela Hall on November 27th, and they're playing Dublin's Tivoli Theatre on November 28th, so make sure you get there. Also a shout out to Diamond Head. That's Diamond Head, the originals, who are playing with Psychosis and Solid Sun in Dublin's Fibber McGee's on November 23rd. Those guys have done very kindly bought some advertising on Metal Ireland. You'll see it on the forums. And that's what happens. You buy the advertising, you get a shout out. So, on with this show. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ralph Santolla. I remember when I got Stench of Redemption. Deicide at that point were not in good shape. They had become a bit of a not a laughing stock, but, they were not in a good place musically. And then all of a sudden, the Stench of Redemption comes and, out of nowhere, it's like firing on all cylinders. It's sixth gear, and there's your amazing guitar just like flowing through it. You saved their asses, really, didn't you?
Dude, to be honest with you, I never even thought of something like that. I just do what I do. I'll say this, though. The guitar playing that I did on that album was one of my peaks as far as, I didn't write anything on that album, but as far as my guitar playing, that was one of my peaks. And the reason for that is a few things. I had been touring with them for about a year, and Steve's music is not very easy to play. So I was playing it, every night almost for a year, and my right hand, my technique had gotten really good because of doing that. I had also started getting into romantic era music, like Franz Liszt and stuff, because of Steve, the drummer, who writes all of that music. He is a fucking genius. There's no doubt about it. And it expanded my mind. And then those ideas, because his music is more angular, I could fit those ideas that I was having onto his music. And also, when we did that album, I had my heart badly broken, so I was super emotional. So I had a lot of feeling. My technique was at a certain peak, like the peak at that time that I could have, and my brain had grown as far as musical ideas, and it all just came together.
Wow. The speed of your kind of legato and the bite of the the way you attack the strings on that it's exemplary lead guitar. And you mentioned Michael Schenker there a while ago, and I can really see it now. I can really hear it, actually, where that connection comes from.
Yeah, and also, like when we did that, Jim Morris engineered, and him and Steve produced it. And Steve didn't really say anything. He said something to me on the next album. I'll tell you about that in a minute. He didn't really say anything, and like I was doing, so it was really just me and Jim was producing it. And like I said, he started recording me when I was 12 fucking years old.
Yeah.
So we're very close, and we have a good, and like very practiced working relationship. Just we don't even, it'll be like either him or me about be like yes or no, do it again, don't do it again. I mean, we're like, dude, I'm 50 years old, so that was 38 years ago he started recording me.
Yeah.
So we are, and he's a big influence on me too. So we did that, and so that's, that was part of it too, because I was just comfortable, recording with him, kind of being in charge, and Steve didn't say anything. And the way I did all that stuff on that particular album is that we would go a section at a time. We'd listen to a section, and I would think of an idea, and then we do that. Then I'd listen to the next section of the solo, and I'd figure out what I want to do. Then we do that till I got it, and so on and so on. And the one thing that me and Steve and me and Jim had a falling out over, and I've had this falling out with Jim since I was a little kid. When I get to the point where I've tried to do something so many times, and it starts to have less feeling, I stop and leave the mistakes, and I don't care what anybody says or how mad anybody gets, I will not do it more. But that's what happened. But then on the next album, the Till Death Do Us Part, there was because we were just talking about Michael Schenker, and like Michael Schenker, Gary Moore, I mean, that's my basic thing. And a couple of times, me and Steve got into it on that album because he thought some of the things that I played were too bluesy for the music. Like, there's one song called Horrors in the Hall of Stone or something, something like that. But you can hear where I flicked the pickup switch from the low one to the high one right in the middle of the thing, and I played this run. I totally improvised it. And Steve didn't like it, and I was like, dude, that's one of the best things I've ever done, and it was totally spontaneous, and we argued, but I said, no, I won't play it. That is staying. But, Steve taught me a hell of a lot about music just by example.
This is weird because a lot of people, certainly for me and many others growing up, will have seen Steve Asheim like not as a background guy, but you've got Glenn out front. He's obviously the big charisma and the big presence, but Steve was always this really rather scary looking skeleton of a presence in Deicide and behind the kit, and he just looked fucking evil, frankly. But he is actually the writer of some considerable pedigree when you think about those songs. Is he like the most? Is he the least understood musician in death metal or something? Writing songs like that.
I never thought about that, and I don't know. But I'll tell you this, man. I started playing music when I was 7 years old, I got serious about it when I was 12, and I've really studied it the rest of my life. So for like 40 years, I mean, I'm serious about music, about learning about it. Steve is a genius. He is absolutely a musical genius. People are different. Like, I fit in better personally in Obituary because them dudes are all like me. They're just Florida white trash like I am. 7-Eleven and Iron Maiden. Everybody in Deicide, even though the band is from here, Jack, Steve, and Glenn, they're all from New York. So they're just different. And, people are different. I'm a people person, and Steve's not as much of a people person, but he is an incredibly brilliant person. He bought a CD, wanted to learn to play piano. He bought a instructional CD, and he worked on it, and now he plays like Liszt and Tchaikovsky on piano. I mean, he's brilliant.
Does it bore you or does it frustrate you always seeing speculation on the internet, when you see about, the reasons for leaving and things like that, and people obviously look at this big evil, with Glenn's history and stuff, and they bring out the whole Catholic thing for yourself and stuff. Is it just boring at this point, really?
No, man. I mean, Jack's one of my best friends. We're like really, really, really close friends. And he's the one that asked me if I wanted to be in the band, and I said, sure, I'll do it, blah, blah, blah. And then Glenn called me, and I just told him, and giving Glenn his due, I told him I will never pretend to be someone I'm not because of your band, and he never, tried to force me or pressure me to pretend I was someone I wasn't. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. Whatever. But that actually was never a problem between me and Glenn. Mm-hmm. As far as I understand why people want to talk about that album and talk about the other albums because it added a new element to a classic band. It added a sort of virtuosity that wasn't there before guitar-wise, but, dude, it was just, fans see that stuff and they're like, wow, was this not, really, it was just my friend down the street, Jack, going, hey, you want to go on tour with Deicide and do an album? I was like, sure. Yeah. I mean, that's all it was.
I mean, you talk about adding a new element.
Bigger thing.
You talk about adding a new element to a classic band. That's really interesting because you had to step into the shoes of the Hoffmans and, visually as well as, hugely musically, because those early Deicide albums, they have a really special and a really particular way of guitar that no one else really sounds like, those arpeggios and that reverb and those whammy bars. But what you did, it wasn't even close. You didn't try to replicate it. You didn't try to move it on because that was before and you were just after, right? I mean, was it intimidating, being put in that position about how to make a new lead guitar sound for Deicide?
No, it wasn't intimidating. I just do what I do, and I am who I am, as Popeye said, and I just play my musical ideas. And Steve-O wanted my ideas, so I just played them. I don't, having said that, I've never replaced a Randy Rhoads or a Michael Schenker or, an Uli John Mott. I don't know what that would be like, but no, any gig that I've ever done, I am always me. James Murphy is a cool dude, and he's my friend, and he's a killer musician. Mm-hmm. But when I was in Obituary, I never played his leads,
Yeah.
even though some of them are really great, I always tell the guys when someone asks me to play with them, I said, okay, but, unless it's something that's like absolutely essential, I'm going to play what comes to my mind. I'm not going to do karaoke type stuff. If you want that, there's a million guys that can do that. If you're going to hire me, then you want my ideas.
Yeah.
So, no, it never intimidated me because I never really even thought about that. I mean, they got me because they wanted my ideas.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean,
that's what they got.
I mean, Obituary is a complete. I mean, individual thought patterns to Obituary is quite a musical jump. Some would say, down the scale. Why did even being an Obituary interest you? Because the music is just so rudimentary and oh yeah, I mean it's enjoyable, but it's I wouldn't have thought it was much of a challenge. I mean, what drew you to them?
Well, one time I went to a studio. I mean, like I said, I told you earlier that I knew all those guys, all of them.
Yeah.
In passing from that scene and from Morrisound when we were all young. And one time I was at a studio, a different studio, and the Tardy brothers were there, and Donald was like, hey, Ralphie. I was like, hey. And then they needed a guitarist, so Donald called me, and, dude, I'll tell you something about those guys. The only thing in my entire life that I have ever been fired from is Obituary. And
why?
I'll get to that. It broke my heart, though, and it still bothered me every day of my life. It was like being kicked out of the family. I love those dudes more than I can even express. They're amazing people. And the happiest I have ever been in my life was being in that band.
And so what happened?
Huh?
So what? I mean, what happened?
Dude, it's a complicated story. I'll try and condense it down for you.
Yeah.
But and by the way, dude, I was in a coma in May.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Good grief. I'm sorry to hear that.
Respiratory failure, and sometimes I can't think now of the word that I'm trying to think of. So if I'm a little bit slow, sometimes it's because of that.
Dude, I had no idea, but I had no idea about that. Good grief.
Okay. It's fucking, and it's funny now, but it still hurts me. Steve DiGirgio started asking me about going down to Medellin, Colombia, to play a death tribute gig with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I mean, this went on for like 3 or 4 months. And I was like, and they weren't going to pay for it, and I had to buy my own ticket. And Steve had to buy his own ticket, but he was friends with the dudes. And he kept asking. I was like, dude, why am I going to? Finally, he was like, look, do you want to be in Medellin, Colombia with me for a week or not? And I was like, oh, all right, fuck it. Yeah, definitely. So I bought my ticket, and we went down there, and at the gig, I met this woman that is so beautiful. She looked like a different species, like incredibly beautiful. And I ended up moving down there and living with her. And for different circumstances, it started giving me fucking anxiety problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lived in Bogota, not Medellin, but that's where the gig was. But anyway, Bogota. And I started drinking to deal with it, which was stupid, but that's what I did. And I had more and more problems, and more anxiety, and more drinking, and then insomnia, and it was a circle, right? So then I finally broke up with her and came back to Tampa, and after about 5 or 6 months, I got over it. And, I was like, I rebounded the other way. I was so euphoric that I just couldn't, I needed a little bit of time to like get that out of my system. And it just became too much of a problem for those guys.
Yeah.
But dude, there's no like bad blood. I fucking love those dudes, and they're all still my good friends. And I need to be doing my own music anyway, not being a sideman for people. I mean, I write music. I do that more than play guitar. So, in a way, it was a blessing. But I miss being in that band terribly, just because I was so close to them.
Yeah, it's really that brings me actually to another point, which is that you are you are one of these very select, hired guns, as it were, for certainly for death metal guitar. I mean, look at what you've brought to records; it's incredible, and bands, certainly with death. I was going to ask you, are you content being kind of the guy that's ready to go at a moment's notice and livens up albums, or does a guy of your talent not seriously want to have his own real, really?
That's why I'm working on Devil's Highway right now, because I really need to have my own band. I would do, the lead guitarist or co-lead guitarist, where else in a band again to tour and stuff, if it was people I wanted to be around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this dude. And I that's what I plan on doing is making Devil's Highway successful. But I would do it. But like, for instance, one of my best friends, now he plays for Udo.
Yeah.
And for Dirk Schneider. And he's almost 20 years younger than me. And he's going all over the world, and he's touring and blah, 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 and doing all this. And he's happy. That's what he wants to do. And I'm happy for him. But I've done that.
Yeah.
What is important to me now is I want to make an album as good as, like, Diary of a Madman, Led Zeppelin 4, AC/DC, Back in Black, something, Toys in the Attic, things like that. And that's what I'm working on with Devil's Highway. To me, right now in my life, the most important thing is the artistic output. But when that's done, I want to go on tour with that and, all that stuff. I mean, I enjoy traveling and all that stuff, but right now my focus is on the artistic output.
And so tell us a little bit about Devil's Highway then. I mean, it sounds from what you're saying like it's maybe a slightly more traditional kind of rock metal kind of album rather than any kind of extreme element.
It's not extreme at all. It's like, I said earlier, it's like trying to describe green.
I love that quote.
But you can't. But it's okay. All the guitars are tuned down, so it sounds heavy. Tony Laureano is an incredible drummer.
Oh, is he in the band?
So there's some, incredible stuff there, but it's like this, and I'm very proud of what I'm about to tell you. It's about the songs and about Kyle, about his vocals, but we've managed to, because it's Tony, DiGirgio, me, Matt from Crowbar, and Kyle. So those are all like, virtuoso musicians.
Yeah.
We've managed to make songs where like everybody is able to show how good they actually are, but it never gets in the way of the music.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that happened. It just happened. But that's what it is. And everybody says this, but you've never seen me say this ever, ever, ever publicly before. This is by far the best thing I've ever done.
Okay. When are we gonna get this? When's it coming out?
Well, here's the thing, man. We're working with Max Norman, who, like I said, produced Higher Than Madman and, you know, all those albums. We're about to do a crowdfunding campaign because now we need some more money to finish. But I'd say the album is 70% finished right now.
Wow.
And I thought we would be a lot further, you know, by now. But, you know, at the end of April, like I said, when I went out there, I collapsed from respiratory failure and I was in a coma for 4 days and in the hospital for 8 days, and it sort of set everything back for a while, but we're getting back into it now. Actually, I worked on some orchestral parts today, and I'm going to work on some guitar stuff tomorrow. Very,
very good. Listen, you've had a tough time of it. I mean, you've been in hospital. You've been through the hurricane recently. I mean, how are yourself and how are your family? How's your home and stuff?
Well, okay. In the hurricane, this is Hurricane that we're talking about.
Yeah.
My son teaches water sports, like parasailing and stuff like that, at Club Med, and he was at where he did work was Club Med in Turks and Caicos. So when the hurricane hit the islands, he was there, you know, in the Caribbean, and it was completely devastated. And like my roof got torn off, stuff like that, but my son was okay. He's in Florida now, and he's going to transfer to Cancun later this week. But, you know, my house getting messed up, whatever, my son was okay. So everything else is just a bonus. Like, you know, people died in those storms, all three of them, in Texas, in Florida, and in Puerto Rico. So, you know, my son's okay. I just lost a little bit of my roof and all that stuff. So it's all fine. You know, and the hospital thing, man, it was frightening and it set things back a bit. But when it's, in my opinion, when it's your time, it's your time. And that wasn't my time. And dude, I came within 60 seconds of dying. You know, it was very, very intense. But, you know, it was what it was. There's other people that just found out they got cancer or their kids got killed in a car wreck or something. I am very blessed. So, you know, there's been some hard stuff over the last year. I broke up with my fiance, all kinds of stuff. But I'm here. I'm working on my music. My son is alive and safe. I've got all my friends. You know, I've got a roof over my head and food to eat. So, fuck it.
So, a fitting way to end, I'm sure you'll agree. We'll be back with more great stuff on the Metal Insight podcast shortly. Till then, please, if you've enjoyed this, leave us a positive review on iTunes. It makes all the difference. Tell people about it. And if you want to advertise in this podcast, like those guys did at the start, just email me. It's easy. mi@metalireland.com. mi@metalireland.com. So, till next time, I'm Earl Grey, over and out.